Hello and welcome to this video on analysis and evaluation for Capstone. I'm Philip Cahoon, Senior Module Leader for Capstone. This video will provide an overview of what analysis is and what it looks like. What analysis is and how it looks depends on the context of the analysis, the type of business, the type of information available, and most importantly, the purpose of the analysis. There is no formula for perfect analysis. What we will provide here is a structure that you can use when undertaking analysis, although you will need to modify that structure for the specific situation that analysis is undertaken in. This video will review what we said about analysis and evaluation in the Capstone orientation material, and will then look at analysis from three angles. Firstly, we will look at the task word and the rubric that we use in Capstone for analysis. We will then look at a real-world accounting and finance example that illustrates how we define analysis in Capstone. Thirdly, we will look at analysis in the past exam paper and how that relates to our rubric and task word. We will complete the video by looking at evaluation. You will remember from the orientation material that Capstone has 8 learning outcomes. 3 of the learning outcomes relate directly to analysis and evaluation. These are access data, analyze information, and synthesize knowledge. Secondly, solve business problems. And thirdly, integrate technical knowledge and professional skills. The 3 learning outcomes lead us to our mega theme for Capstone, which is solving business problems through analysis and evaluation. The value that a chartered accountant adds to his or her client or employer often relates to how they can use the numbers that are produced in the accounting system with their knowledge of business to provide analysis, advice, and solutions. The numbers and the facts about the business are not analysis. It's not even the start of analysis. The numbers and the facts about the business is the step before we start the analysis. Later in this video, you will see how you can add value to your client or your employer through analysis. The second issue to recap from the orientation material is that analysis requires the integration of information from various parts of the business. These include accounting, finance, operational activities of the business, strategic concerns of the business, and the wider environment that the business operates in. In Capstone, your analysis will use information from all of these sources. The key ideas behind this video are: you should treat Capstone like a day in the office. Make your analysis as short as you can, but long enough to cover the important issues. Before you consider you have completed the task, ask yourself, would you give this piece of work to a client or to your boss? If the answer is no, then you can presume it's not up to scratch. Analysis is not numbers. Numbers are important for accountants, but they are not analysis. That includes saying one number is bigger than another, or has increased or decreased by a certain percentage, or calculating financial ratios. None of that is analysis. Analysis is more than just facts. You use facts to perform the analysis. Analysis requires judgment. How parts in the business are interrelated. Is the connection you have made between the facts and the numbers logical, sensible, and technically correct? For analysis in Capstone, you need both depth of analysis, which we will talk about shortly, and you need breadth. In other words, you need to analyze a number of issues so you can evaluate a situation and solve the business problem. Finally, your analysis needs to be related to the business. If it does not link to the business, then it's not adding much of any value. If the client can get the advice from a textbook or from the web, then they are not going to pay you for it. You need to use the facts about the business, including the accounting numbers where relevant, to create the analysis. Without facts, it is generic and limited value. If it's only facts, it's what we already know and therefore of little value. What do we mean by analysis? Our task word means to examine closely, examine something in terms of its parts and show how they are related to each other. To examine something closely, we need to ask, what is it that causes the issue, or makes the issue the way it is? Or what situation in the business does the issue cause? For example, what causes sales to go down? Or what causes revenue to go up? Or what is the expected impact on sales of the predicted growth in the economy? There is really going to be one answer to any of these questions. If you examine something closely, including how it's interrelated to other parts, as in the definition of task words, you're going to find more than one answer. If you can only get one answer, you're probably asking the wrong question or not thinking hard enough. Business, and therefore analysis of business, is complex and involves multiple causes or factors. We have broken analysis down into various stages in the rubric. Let's have a look at the rubric now. Here is a section of the rubric that relates to analysis. If you haven't read it, I suggest you stop the video and go through it, then come back. It would also be a good idea to have a copy of the rubric alongside you now as we go through the rest of the video. To explain the rubric, there are 5 levels which indicate the level of attainment your analysis has reached. They range from below standard on the right-hand side to advanced on the left-hand side. As is noted in the CRM, proficient is the desired standard for a CA candidate. That's the minimum you should be aiming for. Underneath each level is what you need to meet the standard for that level. The important point for analysis is that we expect multiple issues to be analysed. This criteria in the rubric applies to every issue you analyse. We're going to look at this rubric in a different way in the following slides. First in general terms, then using a real-world example, and lastly looking at an answer to a CAP 215 exam question. We're going to explain what analysis looks like in Capstone using the same rubric, just in a different format. You'll see down the left-hand side of these slides the attainment level. Down the right-hand side, you will see the rubric's explanation of what you need to do to get to each attainment level. And in the middle is what you need to do. For developing, it's going to be just facts. Could be calculated by the computer, ratios, numbers, differences in numbers, the facts that are provided by the client. You're not adding any value. It is essentially repetition of data. This is not enough. It's well below the expected standard. Competent takes those facts and provides an explanation of the current situation, linking facts together. It must be based on evidence from the scenario. You don't make stuff up. And it must be technically correct. For example, a few candidates can confuse sales revenue going down and gross margin percentage going up. Now, these two can be linked, but not always, and you need to explain why the link exists in this business case. As you see on the full rubric, technically incorrect takes your analysis to below standard. Essentially, competent is explaining the issue, but that's below the standard we expect of the chartered accountant program candidate. Proficient. How the issue identified links to other parts of the business. Business is all about interconnected parts. So you've got to have links between different parts. So we discuss the issue in relation to other parts of the business. Now this is the minimum standard we expect you to get to in Capstone. Advanced, which you should be aiming for, to be honest. Advanced, why does the client need to know this? Why is it important? This is what we call the so what. Why are you telling me this? Why am I paying you for this advice and this analysis? This will be linked to the operation of the business and or the business strategy. Now, going back over that, you do need the facts from the start, but they're not enough. You need to link the current situation with those facts, but that's not enough. You need to connect it to other parts of the business, and you need to link it to the operation of the strategy and to say why. So they're the four parts, that finishing with the so what. Oops. Looking now at analysis from the real world, close to the world of the chartered accountant. The document on the screen, which you don't need to review, was picked almost randomly from a recent takeover analysis reports. It was the first one that I looked at when searching for an example of analysis in the accounting and finance space. There would be lots of other examples we could have used. It was done by Grant Samuel, a corporate advisory group serving Australia, New Zealand and the Asia Pacific markets. A bit of background to the paragraph we're going to look at. Well, the document is prepared for the independent directors for distribution to shareholders when considering accepting or rejecting the takeover offer for Fisher & Paykel Appliances. It's about 70 pages long. It goes through the operations, accounting and finance information, strategy and the business environment. Like everything in the star diagram we saw earlier, it uses that information to analyse and evaluate the takeover offer. We are now going to look at one paragraph in the financial summary section that looks at the impact of the Australian market for the company in relation to its strategic plan and how that links to financial information. The focus for this document is on the future value and therefore future performance. What we are going to look at is what makes up the analysis from a real world document. So the document begins with a line that says, in Australia, revenue declined in financial year 2012. That's just a repetition of data. It's barely developing. They then add into that sentence that decline in revenue was due to increased price competition and a small loss of market share across all categories except the cookware appliances. So that just hits competent. We're just going to explain why revenue declined. Once again, they weren't saying it. The explanation there was why revenue declined. It didn't explain how much it declined by. It was why. So that's the competent. Then it goes on to a long paragraph on a long couple of sentences that says, in the financial year 2013, Fisher & Paykel Appliances expects to grow market share following the introduction of a significant number of new products. And goes on. In 5 years to 2017, the combined appliances higher unit market share is planned to increase, with the biggest share of growth coming from the higher product. That's linking revenue decline and revenue growth and revenue, essentially the revenue section in Australia, to other parts of the business. It's what's happening overall. That would give us our proficient. Finally, the so what. Despite the increase in gross margin for 2013 over the previous year, the 5-year plan envisaged a slight erosion of margin. A sustained downturn in Australia, a loss of market share, or a price war could result in significant reduction in profitability for appliances. That's your so what. Why have you told me about previous year's revenue and what they're planning to do? They conclude that paragraph, that one tiny bit of analysis, with a so what. This is why you should be concerned about the revenue in the Australian market. And what I suggest you do now is stop the video and have a look at that full paragraph we've got up there and how it flows through from developing to competent to proficient to advanced. I'm going to do another example. This one, same thing, except it's from an exam paper. And the exam paper was the CAP 215 main exam. So a candidate would have written to get developing. Sales revenue has decreased by 6% on 2014. The rate of decline has increased from 3.4% in 2014 to 6% in 15. That's repetition of data. Even if we didn't tell them what those percentages were and they calculated themselves. It's just data. They've just calculated the decline, and that the decline is increasing. A competent would take that further and say, there are a number of possible reasons for this trend, one of which is the increasing competitive pressure on both large and specialist retailers. That fact was in the case. Candidates were told that there was an increase in competition. What a candidate did was to explain why revenue was going down by linking it to material in the case, by linking it to a fact. Not a fact on its own. Take that to proficient though, because just telling us what's happening is not enough. It is this decline in sales revenue that has largely contributed to a decline in the operating profit, the net surplus, return on equity, and the return on assets. So all of those declines you can see in the financial statements and you were given, but you had to work out what was causing them. They weren't being caused by other things. And so we've linked that reduction in sales revenue to other parts of the business. Now, to take that to the advanced level, and you should all be aiming to do this, management should consider changing the business strategy from one which is focused on cost reduction and market share to one of revenue and gross margin enhancement. You're told in the question that the business strategy is this cost reduction and market share. And you can see that happening. But the so what from this analysis of the sales revenue is that it actually isn't going to work because you are going to have this pressure from large and specialist retailers that is going to affect your profit. So now our so what is your strategy is not going to work due to your competitive pressures. And the last part of that sentence takes the part that says one of revenue and gross margin enhancement, takes that to the next level and says, for example, using product bundling to achieve high margins whilst offering customer a discount. So it's not a general sort of thing, oh yes, you should increase your margins, because that's just general information or general ideas. Specific to the industry that this case study was on, product bundling isn't one way of achieving an increase in revenue and gross margins. What I suggest you do, again, is stop the video, read through that slide with a copy of the rubric. What we're trying to get you to do here is understand, for analysis, you go from this data to explaining the data, to linking to other parts of the data, to giving the reader, the client, your employer, whoever, giving them the so what. Things to see there, it is based on evidence. It is based on facts. And it does go to a so what. There is a point to what you're telling them. So, moving on, the final point to note about analysis before we turn to evaluation is that we've only so far looked at analysis for one issue and broken that down into parts. Last time we just talked about sales revenue. In practice, it doesn't happen like that. You don't break it down. It's all one paragraph, like the examples we've seen. One sentence following the next, showing how the various parts and how they're interrelated. In Capstone for analysis, you need to attain at least a proficient level. Before you hit the proficient, it's not analysis. You also need a range of relevant issues to analyse, so that you can put them together and evaluate them to solve the business problem. In Workshop 1 and 2 assessments, we will tell you the minimum you're expected to analyse. So in summary, analysis is about depth, going to that advanced level with the so what for every issue, and it's equally about breadth, identifying a number of issues that need to be analysed. Once you've done the analysis with both depth and breadth, then you need to evaluate the analysis, which is where we go to now. We're going to come back to this Grant Samuel report. Remember, they are a corporate advisory group serving Australia, New Zealand, and the Asian Pacific markets. And this is what they have said about their analysis and converting that analysis into evaluation. Grant Samuel's opinion is to be considered as a whole. Selecting portions of the analysis or factors considered by it, without considering all the factors and analysis together, could create a misleading view of the process underlying the opinion. The preparation of an opinion is a complex process. It is not necessarily susceptible to partial analysis or summary. What they are saying is you can't take small parts of the report, such as the analysis of one issue, like we did, but you need to evaluate all the issues together. This is what we expect you to do when we ask you to evaluate. Looking at the task word for evaluate now, determine the value of something, normally with reference to specific criteria. Determining the value of something, how useful is the analysis of each issue for solving the business problem? Working out which issues you have analysed are more valuable to help solve the problem. Now, the specific criteria that you'll be using would be the purpose of the report. Why are you analysing? Let's have a look at the rubric. The rubric is reasonably straightforward. I'm just going to focus on the advanced part. An advanced evaluation goes through all the issues covered in the analysis, comparing them against each other, and coming up with a conclusion, which will be in terms of the purpose of the report and or the problem. Often, it will be about solving a business problem. Go back and all those things we've analysed, we bring it all together. We evaluate, this is good, this is bad from these analysis issues that we've come up with. And we come up with a decision and a conclusion and maybe solving business problems. Once again, I suggest you stop the video and have a look through the 5 levels from advanced down to below standard. Just going to recap now the key points that I started the video with. Treat Capstone like a day in the office. Ask yourself, would you give this piece of work to a client or to your boss? If the answer is no, then you can presume it's not up to scratch. Analysis is not the numbers, including the financial ratios. Analysis is more than facts. You use facts and numbers to perform the analysis, but just giving us the numbers or just giving us the facts is not analysis. Analysis does require judgment. It is the connections you have made between facts and numbers. It needs to be logical, sensible, and technically correct. Analysis needs to have depth and breadth. You need to analyse in some depth, and you need to analyse a number of issues. Finally, and really importantly, they're all important, but really importantly, finally, your analysis needs to be related to the business. If it doesn't link to the business, then you're not adding much value. Well, I hope you found that helpful. I suggest you do review this, review the rubrics, and then review what you've done already. Analysis is key in Capstone. Thank you very much.